After the Civil War, there were a series of booms and busts in the national economy that caused massive unemployment and instability for working people, in a time before there was any sort of Social Security or unemployment insurance. There were also huge influxes of immigrants from Europe and East Asia. Once they got here, many of these immigrants faced discrimination and even violence from people already here who considered them to be different or dangerous or just competition for jobs and opportunities. This was the situation in Tacoma in 1885, with its mud streets, wooden buildings, sawmills, railroad terminus, and the burgeoning port along the foot of the bluff. In 1882, the U.S. Congress in Washington, D.C. had passed a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act, which for the first time in American history slammed the door shut on immigrants from one particular country, in this case China. Chinese had come to the U.S. first during the gold rush, and then as invited workers during the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. They had often done the hardest, most dangerous jobs, and some, after a while, took their earnings and opened simple businesses to lead a more lucrative and safer life. They opened restaurants, laundries, and stores. They started farms, worked in logging camps, in mines, and in fishing. Some became quite wealthy, particularly in the large Chinatown in San Francisco. They set up businesses serving fellow Chinese, such as Chinese pharmacies, lending agencies, and labor contracting. International associations and businesses were established, with offices in San Francisco and Shanghai, New York and Hong Kong. Treaties were signed between the U.S. and Chinese governments, establishing how and when Chinese could immigrate to the U.S., and how the U.S. should care for Chinese-born citizens. But by 1882, enough Americans were worried enough about Chinese immigration that the Chinese Exclusion Act was signed into law. By 1883, 2 rail lines had arrived in the Puget Sound area, one in Tacoma and one in Seattle. And in the Tacoma area, about 1 in every 10 people were Chinese. During the court cases following the illegal expulsion of the Chinese from Tacoma in 1885, Chinese merchants were asked to provide statements in which they reported what their businesses in Tacoma had been, what happened to them on that day, and what they had lost. These are the only records we have from the Chinese point of view, but they provide for us an invaluable insight into their lives, their businesses, and their experiences during the expulsion events. By October 1885, Tacoma mayor and German immigrant Jakob Weisbach had organized a small but radical consortium of labor activists and white supremacists to expel all Chinese from Tacoma. Posters were put up telling the Chinese that they must leave the city, never to return. Boycotts of Chinese businesses began, as well as scattered acts of violence or intimidation. There were prominent citizens arguing against the expulsion, such as Ezra Meeker, and voices such as Father Hylebos, at least cautioning against violence. But most citizens apparently either agreed with the overall goal or just stayed silent. On November 3rd, the factory whistle blew, the white mob, led by the mayor and other city officials, formed with guns and clubs, and the Chinese were forced outside their homes and marched in driving rain to the railroad station in Lakewood, where they were forced to board trains south to Vancouver. Tacoma was left with the international reputation of an unlawful, mob-run city, and remains today the only major city on the U.S. West Coast without a Chinatown. The goal of the Chinese Reconciliation Project Foundation is to reconcile the tragic expulsion events of 1885, to prevent the reoccurrence of similar events, to set a reconciliation example for other communities across the country, and to promote a peaceful, multicultural community. The Chinese Reconciliation Park is designed in 5 rooms, like a traditional Chinese garden, the final 2 of which are the cultural celebration and education rooms. The park has been developed in phases, the first 3 now complete, and a favorite destination of Tacomans and visitors. The 4th phase, designed but not yet funded, includes the Multicultural Pavilion, a large indoor space suitable for both public and private events year-round. The design, now complete, is based upon similar buildings in Chinese gardens in both Portland and Vancouver, BC. The second major activity of the CRPF has been the development and production of the annual Tacoma Moon Festival, which since 2012 has brought 2,000 to 3,000 people to the park each September for a celebration of Tacoma's rich cultural diversity. Artists and craftspeople, vendors and food trucks, and a rich display of performing artists bring the audience back year after year. In both 20 and 21, the Tacoma Moon Festival moved online, and Tacoma Creates has been an essential source of funding. The 2021 online festival opens with a welcome page, including the invitation to come backstage to meet the artists and performers in their own cultural communities. A vendors page includes some of the many cooks, craftspeople, and organizations who frequently participate in our live festival. The Activities and Education page presents videos of cooking, crafts, a reading and author interview, and a recent video by the Tacoma Refugee Choir. The Culture page takes the viewer to 4 Tacoma Buddhist temples during festivals, to the summer dance camp of the Hilltop's acclaimed Tupac Dance School, and to a variety of community groups celebrating or teaching heritage traditions. To replace several other live events planned with local Tacoma organizational partners, CRPF created a number of online events, the first of which was 3 music videos co-produced with Symphony Tacoma of 3 arias from the new opera Tacoma Method by local librettist Zhang R and local composer Gregory Utz. These and an hour-long conversation program were broadcast as part of Symphony Tacoma's regular online season offerings in April 2021. An extensive study guide was produced for high school level students, which will be useful in preparation for Tacoma Opera's planned production of the full opera in spring 2023. In the second major Tacoma Creates funded project, CRPF partnered with Tacoma author Judy Carlson Hulbert on the publication and launch of her new young adult novel, The Wind Will Not Stop, and produced both a live launch event that drew 200 people to the Chinese Reconciliation Park in July, and led to further online events about the book produced by the Tacoma Public Library and the Tacoma Historical Society. An extensive educational packet for middle school teachers was also produced to support classroom use of the novel. In October, as part of the Tacoma Moon Festival, CRPF partnered with the University of Puget Sound to produce a powerful live panel discussion.
So let me just stop and just say that along the way, there weren't others like me at all. I can say for sure that my mentors were white males. My role models were Asian women and other women of color. But I can say in the legal profession, there weren't many of us who I could say, teach me, show me, and tell me what to do. So the third rule, and this is a rule that I continue to live by and to propagate as much as I can, is take the space. Take the space. Be there. Fill the vacuum. Take the space.
Here are just a few samples of the many videos produced for the online 2021 Tacoma Moon Festival.
My name's Sandra. I'm 8 years old.
And how long have you been playing this instrument?
Almost like 2 years.
Yeah. What do you like about playing this?
The song.
What does the sound remind you of?
My Vietnam family.
So Hương Việt Performing Arts Group was founded 20 years ago, and one of the mission is that we are not involved in any politics. Of course, as our students, some have their own political agenda. We have students who believe in socialism, some people believe in Republican, Democrat, all kind of political involvement. But when we come to music, we are the same. We just come here with the love for Vietnamese music, with no political agenda. And so far, we appreciate that, and we want to keep that the same.
My name is Ariel Advincula, and I've been teaching with Tupac since December 2017. I teach hip-hop dance to the little kids. I learned hip-hop through my aunties, my uncles, my cousins. Growing up, I didn't have access to studios, so I learned a lot at home through being babysitted by my aunties and uncles. What I love about Tupac is the diversity and how it feels like a family. I also love that it is Black-owned, BIPOC-owned, and I love the representation that it gives. For the past 7 years that I've been teaching, this is the first BIPOC-owned studio that I've ever worked at. A lot of them that I worked at were owned by white folks, and I felt very tokenized. Here in Tupac, I feel welcomed like a family, and it's lovely, and I love it.
My name is Renee. I have been with Tupac for about 4 years. I am a pre-ballet teacher here, and I also volunteer. And my favorite thing about Tupac is all the collaborations we do and the different projects we do that are not traditional and new and different and exciting.
Like I said, the majority is Hawaiian music, and that's the part that I want to perpetuate. My son and my granddaughter, and now my great-granddaughter, my fourth generation here. I want to see how much of this I can pass on to them.
When we first established our dance group, it was to keep kids off the street. They don't feel belong because the first generation didn't accept them. Because when they go to school, they become Americanized. And so the first generation didn't accept them, and then they not belong in American society as well. The group is kind of like said, hey, you have so much to offer to the community at large. Why not offering your art and culture to the community, and to keep you that the first generation will see you that you cherish what they brought, and they have nothing with them except the art and culture. It's so important to us.